So this is going to be the most vulnerable video I've ever posted, and I'm going to do it all in one take to keep it as natural as possible. I do have notes on the side. Um, Videos about burnout. Now, as many of you know, I live at home with my parents still. I'll explain in a little bit why it is that I live at home with my parents still, despite having a successful agency. But over the past 10 days, I went from working 65 hours a week, pretty much all day, every day, down to 15 to 20 hours a week, hardly doing anything. I'm sleeping in almost every day. Um, Overall, just kind of done with everything and completely exhausted. I'm burnt out, right? I did a lot of research on burnout in the past because I've been burnt out multiple times, and apparently I still haven't learned my lesson. But I did find a way to actually prevent it that I'm currently working on. And if you're early on in your journey, starting off with this is going to help you so much. Like, I wish I knew what I'm about to tell you going in. A big part of all the videos on this channel are just like, this is all the stuff that nobody told me that I wish I knew. And yeah, so I did find a way to actually prevent burnout, and I'll get to that in a little bit. um, Again, I'm still working on it clearly as I'm burnt out right now, so I'm not trying to tell you, like, do this and be a complete hypocrite. I'm just saying, like, this is what I'm learning as I'm going, right? Because I'm still on my own journey in my agency, right? But for you to be able to prevent burnout, there are a few things we need to talk about. And the first one is basically the reality of entrepreneurship, which is nobody talks about it, man. I mean, I don't know that for sure. I hardly watch YouTube myself, and I especially don't watch SMMA YouTube, but nobody talks about this stuff from anything that I saw on my come up. And one thing that I want to touch on first is that a lot of people get into entrepreneurship with this idea of, like, build this cool lifestyle, whatever, and they don't know what it really takes and what the reality of it is. And the harsh reality is that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's really, really, really not. And to illustrate this, and it's especially not for people who don't want to work hard. To illustrate this, I mean, let's just look at what the job description of an entrepreneur is. Maybe that's not the right word, but what you do as an entrepreneur is you run multiple departments of a business. Let's say you start off with, like, marketing, sales, product, customer support, just for 4 core things. So within those, even within an agency, there are really 5 things, because within sales, there's appointment setting and closing. Not to mention, you're doing the job of an entrepreneur on top of that, which is like building an offer, for example, right? Which is partially product, but it's not. And an offer is a little bit different. But there are 6 things right there that you need to learn from scratch. So I've talked about this in another video. I'm not going to lean too hard into it, but if you go to learn how to become a computer programmer, within a year you'll get a couple thousand hours of experience. But if you're dividing that over 6 different tasks, you're only really getting 300 hours, 330 hours in 6 different tasks, right? So it takes you 6 times longer to get as good. So in a year you can get up to a certain income level as a computer programmer, but if you start learning all these things at one time, in entrepreneurship, it takes you significantly longer to get up to that same skill level, which allows you to make a certain amount of money, so on and so forth. So that's one thing, right? You're starting off with these, like, 6 things, but what people don't understand is that the higher you scale, the more jobs you have to learn while still being good at the core set of jobs. So let's take a simple example of, you have to build an appointment setting process completely from scratch, after building a lead gen process from scratch, after building an offer from scratch, after building a sales process from scratch. You have to learn how to do all this stuff yourself. Then what ends up happening is, once you have an appointment setting process and you find that's what's taking up a lot of your time, and you want to hire an appointment setter, usually you're going to hire an admin or a fulfillment person first, but let's use an appointment setter as this example. Now you have to become HR and hire and learn how to hire. That hiring is a completely different funnel. Like, your interviews are your appointments, your sales appointment equivalent in your hiring funnel. So you have to generate leads and appointments in your hiring funnel in order to sell to those people why they should work for you. Hiring's easier generally. It's easier than sales in a lot of ways, but it's also harder in a lot of other ways because you have to be good at picking the right people and nobody's perfect. But you then have to hire them and learn how to do that. So you're HR, but then you have to onboard and manage them. So now you're a manager, but you're not just a manager. You are specifically a sales manager. So what happens down the line is, well, let's say you've already hired a fulfillment person. Well, you're also like a marketing manager or an admin manager or something like this. So you're two different kinds of managers now, on top of knowing how to do their jobs. So add that to the list, now you're up at 8 jobs. Well, you bring in a sales closer, for example. That's up to 9 jobs, right? You have to manage that salesperson. And the number of jobs keeps growing, right? And, you know, let's say you hire a marketing person for your own company, not for your clients, because in SMMA, you're usually doing the marketing for your clients. So that would be your fulfillment person. But if you hire a media buyer for yourself, well, now you're managing them too in a different realm. So now you're a manager of something else, right? And so you're up at like 9 to 10 jobs just to get to like, a couple $100,000 a month just. But like, you're doing 10 jobs. You have to become really, really good, seriously good at 10 jobs that aren't like they're not all just like walk in the park jobs. Like, sales is not for everybody. Sales, you're making a couple $100,000 a year in a lot of cases, right? Maybe it's 150, but like, you have to build that job while paying for the ads, while paying the people that you're paying to hire and train. You're spending your time training them, and then you have to manage them. Like, people don't realize what goes into this. They just don't, and I had no clue. Like, I had some kind of an idea. I was like, oh, it's going to be hard, but like, it's hard, man. That's why a lot of people partner up. You move further faster if you have a partner. Now you lose 50%, and you have to pick the right partner, and there are a lot of downsides of having a partner as well. Disagreements, disputes, this kind of stuff. But that's the reality, right? If you're gonna go solo, like, that's the reality of things. Like, you're killing yourself doing all these different things, learning them from scratch. And again, you can't be mediocre at all of them. You have to be really good at all of them to get to these big numbers that you're looking at, to like really actually get rich. Like, actually. Not like I have $200,000 in the bank. Like, that can buy you a house in like God knows where, but you're not set for life if you have $200,000 in the bank. Not even close, right? So if you're looking to get to that level, like, this is what you have to do. And if that drives you away, then maybe it's a good thing, right? I don't know. For me, I know entrepreneurship is what I want to do. Like, I've always struggled in jobs, and I've always, I get bored really easily. I want to be doing something dynamic and new and challenging, and this is a worthy challenge in my eyes. Like, this is one of the most difficult things I could have chosen to do, if not the most difficult thing. I mean, I don't really know, but I know entrepreneurship is a notoriously challenging career. Because not only do you have all this stuff, right, you still have to maintain relationships in your personal life, right? You still have to maintain relationships with your clients, so on and so forth. Like, it's really hard. And, one thing I've heard is the number one rule of being a CEO is don't talk about the CEO breakdown. It's inevitable that you're going to, like, panic at times. and have problems. Like maybe you've heard of this, maybe not, but the average entrepreneur bankrupts themselves between 1 and 3 times in their career. So like go in knowing that. Seriously. There's a really good chance you're gonna lose all your money more than once. It's messed up, right? I almost fully went flat broke. I was like right on the edge last year in January. I was down to my last like $2,000. I've told this story before. And it cost me $2,000 a month to do my cold email with like the VA team I had. Luckily, I locked in, and the next month was like $14,000. But I was on a 5-month dry streak. I raised my prices too high, all that kind of stuff. Like this is like real. This is what happens. People just don't talk about it. I don't like. A lot of people watching my channel look up to me. Right? You're like, oh, Evan's very successful. What I don't feel successful most of the time. Like, I constantly feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. And also, since I'm so heavily reinvesting, which is a really important part of entrepreneurship to scale really far, as entrepreneurs, our bank accounts grow, right? But being absolutely loaded, like that takes years. And usually what you're doing is sacrificing your personal income for the growth of the business. I still pay myself like nothing. I take what I need in order to live, but like I personally spend like $500 to $1,000 a month. I'm going to Europe next week with my girlfriend for 10 days. That's the first time I've ever spent like, $4 or $5,000 just blowing it. Like I've never done that in my life. And, what does that mean? I mean, it's just a testament to show you that I'm not out here like balling hard and whatever. Like it's a grind, and I'm reinvesting like crazy. And sometimes your investments will lose, but you're going for the investments that win, right? And like, this is why I live at home, right? Do I need another, like I live in Toronto, so rent's pretty expensive. Obviously inflation, food and everything. Like, do I need another $4,000 a month in expenses on top of my 30? Not really, right? So I'll just sit tight and wait till I have a really healthy base, because one thing can go wrong, your ads can spin out of control, and all of a sudden you're in a really sketchy situation where you only have a few months of cash to operate the business in the bank, and you're in a pretty dire situation. Now, I'm not quite there right now, but I'm not quite comfortable right now, given my expenses. Generally speaking, you want to have a bare minimum of like 6 months of cash, 6 months of expenses in the bank, right? If you don't have that, it's easy to get very overwhelmed and panic and make stupid decisions and do dumb things and screw everything up. So one of the skills you need to learn also is to just kind of like hands off. I know I'm kind of going off on a bunch of different tangents here, but most of the time I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, because I don't. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before, right? That's the reality of it. That feeling doesn't go away. The number in your bank account goes up, but everything else stays the same, right? I neglected relationships in my personal life for a while, and now I'm like, damn, probably shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I think to an extent it was necessary. That's another conversation. But, yeah, so one thing I also want to add here is like, when I say stuff, like if you actually listen to it and follow and do what I say, you'll see that it's true. You just have to trust it. I watched some guys that I looked up to on YouTube for a while, and they would say, one guy said exactly that. He was saying that, the neglecting of relationships thing. And he was like, I know a lot of people who are like doing really well in business and they're miserable. And like, that's kind of what happened to me a little bit. So like, I'm reforming a lot of what I'm doing right now, because I was too focused on the money for a while, and like it's not a good thing. Um, it's also really hard emotionally. Like, I hadn't cried for like 10 years or something like that since I was a kid before starting my agency and going really hardcore. Last year I cried like 3 times. So I was just killing myself working, right? Like, it's it really takes a toll on you. Like, it's extreme, but there's it's very true also that one thing that I heard in a Hormozy tweet was like, muscles get bigger by being constantly torn and repaired, right? The same goes with your emotions and your, I guess, emotional strength, right? This is another part of why it's really hard. You're managing like so many things. It's extremely stressful, right? Like, I started seeing floaters in my vision. I thought I was literally going crazy. Talked to my doctor and stuff. No, it was all good. There was a period of time where, for a good few months, I was getting headaches about 15 days a month. Not even joking. Went away after about 5 months. That happened. This is like the opposite of selling, getting into business, right? Instead of me telling you this is amazing, you should do it, I'm saying like, do it. It's rewarding. But know what you're getting into, because I didn't, and I was surprised, and that led a lot to my burnout. And one of the things that's also really important is attachment to outcomes, your revenue numbers. And, I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was saying like, oh, I want to hit like 10K in the next 30 days, but I know it's, not what I'm like, dude, I was the exact same way. Like, odds are you're not hitting 10K in the next 30 days. And if you do, you're just going to not hit it the next month, because that's how it goes, generally speaking. Like, there are very, very few people, very few, that start off, hit 10 grand a month, and then just go from there. Like, one of my buddies, PhD in electrical engineering, smart guy, started a business. I taught him how to do like his YouTube ads and stuff. He did 11 grand in his first month. But then like he's been hovering around like 5K a month or so, kind of up and down. Granted, he's still like doing his PhD. But that's like the fastest result I've seen from somebody who just started a new business, right? Like, that's uncommon on its own. And so don't expect this instant stuff. So what we need to do really is remove any attachment to money, because it's going to take a long time before you have a lot of money to throw away. You look at me, you look at, really any of these other agency guys on YouTube. I guess the ones who are more established, like, I've been doing marketing for real estate agents for 4 years now. Like, this isn't something I started last year, right? Like, 4 years, especially when you're young, 4 years feels like forever. And I'm still not even fully there. A lot of the guys who are doing 500 grand a month, like, they have a partner, which makes you grow like more than twice as fast. And they've been doing it for like 6 years, where they started an agency and then moved up the ladder to sell coaching, for example, right? Like, there's no overnight success, and it's easy to think there is when you start out, and I thought there was, and that really got in my head. So this, in my opinion, is probably the most important discussion I've ever had on this channel, because this is what goes unsaid. As far as I know, again, maybe other people do talk about this. I don't watch this YouTube stuff, but in terms of preventing burnout, I told you before, I can tell you how to prevent it, right? Well, the reality of burnout is that it's primarily based on reward and emotions, from my experience. I have a video that I'll link in the comments. It's from a guy, he's a Harvard psychiatrist, or Harvard grad psychiatrist. He has a YouTube channel, made an hour-long video on burnout, so you can understand burnout a little bit better. Thought it was a really good video. I'll link it in the comments. But basically, like, again, being based on reward and emotions, there's more to it, but if you can just, another big part of it is expectations, right? But I'll talk about reward and emotions first. Reward is like, how much work are you putting in and how much reward are you getting, right? A big part of, and this may completely shock you, but this is shit that people don't talk about. In the last 3.5 months, I'm down like 45 grand and I worked like 1,000 hours. Right? How does that happen? I'll explain very briefly. I pay 17 G's to a sales recruiter, right? I've got my ads running where I'm spending like 15 G's a month. Sales recruiter brings 3 sales reps on, right? So I'm only taking 25% of the call volume. And the 3 sales reps for 8 weeks, 96%, 95% of the calls don't close because they're calibrating. I fire 2 reps and the third one finally calibrates after like 2.5 months, right? So in ad budget alone, down a lot of money. Not to mention I have an appointment setter that I pay about $3,500 to $4,000 a month. I have an operations guy that I pay $4,000 to $5,000 a month. I have $2,000 to $3,000 a month in other expenses, right? I'm putting money into this YouTube channel. And there's also the opportunity cost of me not being on those calls, because me being on those calls, I would have had a record month and probably hit my first 100K month, but instead I went for the sales rep path. This stuff happens. This stuff just happens. And like, everything's fine. I'll be turning around and like, everything's good. I still have healthy call volume. I'm still pacing now, even more revenue than I was before. I'm still pacing like 80K per month or so with my current call volume. My lead costs went up a little bit because of ad fatigue, so now I'm experimenting with that. I have to test more money on that. I dropped $1,000 here, $1,000 there on testing some of that stuff. No results, right? This stuff happens. This happens. There's nothing you can do. This is part of the game. So, is this really a game you want to play? If it is, I'm happy to be the one to tell you how it works, because nobody told me how it works. Everybody gives you the big numbers. That's what I experienced. I don't know if that's still true today, but everybody just gave me the big numbers, and I thought it would be fun, and it's easy to make $100,000 a month. It is, but it's really also not. Like in my business journey, again, I'm like 5,000 to 7,000 hours deep, somewhere in that area. And so that's the concept of reward, right? If I put in, again, like 300 and something hours a month, right? And I do that for 3.5 months, I work 1,000 hours and I lose 45 grand. It's pretty easy to like get in your head about that, right? And it depends on, are you a neurotic person? Are you not? I have neurotic tendencies. I've been getting a lot better throughout the last several years of my life. But, I used to like be on antidepressants, and like I was depressed for a little while, just after high school kind of thing. So I struggle with that sometimes. But that's the reward thing. Emotions, it's an emotional roller coaster, and you'll need to learn how to deal with your emotions, especially a lot of guys, men, don't or haven't dove deep into their emotions. So having a girlfriend has helped a lot with that. Some people will say don't have a girlfriend, it's distracting. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, I don't know. But you're gonna be challenged with your emotional intelligence, and sometimes you'll break down. It happens. And that's what happens when you strive for greatness. The challenge is so intense and you try so hard, and sometimes it's just you can't take it. But when you still wake up the next day, or when you still sit down and cry and then just go back to your desk, like, that just shows that you're doing the right thing. And like, I'm even getting a little bit emotional just having this conversation, because it's like, it's so real. It's so real. Now, in terms of expectations for preventing burnout, if you know what to expect, this video is meant to be the main thing on its own that's going to prevent your burnout, because you know what to expect, right? You know to expect years before you have a ton of money in the bank account, right? And that's a big part of it. But the biggest part of preventing burnout is acceptance of reality. Can you accept, truly, I've struggled with this, can you truly accept that this is just how it goes? It's very easy to be impatient when you're young, because you've only lived so many years. So again, 5 years feels like a big part of your life, especially if you're like 18, 19, 20. I was 20 when I started my agency, right? 5 years is like, you know, I'd only been an adult for 2 years. So looking at 5 years is like, that's crazy. And then you also compare yourself to other people, where you see other people online and they're making so much money and you're like, yo, this is crazy. They're only giving the highlights, right? Classic. That's something everybody's talked about. And it's easy to get in your head, but if you can accept this reality that odds are you're not going to be balling for years, multiple years, then if you can accept that, then that will help prevent your burnout, and you'll be able to go through this entire journey so much more relaxed. I wish I knew this. I seriously wish I knew this, because I haven't been relaxed historically. The habit has been ingrained that, you know, I've been thinking for years that, like, oh, I need to make this amount of money by this day, this amount of money by this day, this month, this time, right? That now I'm fighting just to kick that habit and constantly remind myself that just let it happen. Let it happen when it happens. Stop trying so hard. Stop trying to control everything. Right? But one thing that I strongly believe, this is a long video, one thing that I strongly believe is that the harder you try, the harder it is. Now, interestingly enough, Alex Hormozi tweeted the opposite. He wrote, the harder you try, the easier it is. I agree, but there are diminishing returns, right? The harder you try, the easier it gets, but when you try too hard and you try to control everything, it gets hard. It gets harder, right? Mentally. And then you start screwing yourself. And, you know, like, it does get harder. So you need to find the balance between, like, how hard should I try? Well, you should try your heart out to make it happen, but you should not try your heart out to make it happen by X date. Don't do that. This is one of those things where I say, if you just do what I say and trust it, you'll learn that I'm right. This is seriously important. It has created so much misery for me in building any business that I've ever built. It's created so much hardship, so many challenges. So don't do that. Try really hard to make it happen, but let it happen the way it happens and when it happens. Problems are inevitable. This is another thing. If you can accept the reality that the bigger you scale your agency, the higher the stakes, the higher the stress levels, the higher the risk, and the more problems, the bigger the problems you'll have. That's the truth, right? Like, yeah, that's just how it is. If you can accept that, seriously accept it, then this will help you a lot. I mean, I've dropped so much in this video. I could have probably made 9 videos out of all of this just because of the different points and concepts, and I can talk forever about this stuff. If I were you, I would watch this video again and take notes by hand. I don't know if you know this, but writing notes by hand increases your information retention. It helps it stick in your brain better. So I would watch this over and write it by hand. And I would suggest you do that with any of my videos because it'll just help you retain the information better. So that's my talk on burnout. Again, that video will be linked in the top comment so you can learn a little bit more, but that's it on burnout.